Welcome to Instant Deck Techs. The aim of this series is to give you a short, concise guide on how to build a certain deck. It won't cover every card, but we'll go through all the categories and go over the types of cards needed to make the deck work. Any card mentioned will be down in the description below. The commander of this deck is Tiamat. It is 2 and a Wooburg for a 7/7 legendary creature, Dragon God. It has flying, and when Tiamat enters the battlefield, if you cast it, search your library for up to 5 dragon cards not named Tiamat that each have different names, reveal them, and put them into your hand. Then shuffle. Unsurprisingly, this is going to be a dragon tribal deck. We'll be running all kinds of big fiery beasts to help win us the game. We'll be using Tiamat as a resource to get the best dragons from our deck and into our hand, and then we'll use some cheat effects to get them into play. We'll be mentioning dragon cards and cards that care about them all throughout the video, and we'll go over the biggest hitters when we get to our win cons at the end, so do look out for them. Worth mentioning before we get started that to keep the deck under £1 million, this is going to be a base Gruul deck, only really splashing for big dragons and effects to help us win the game. It'll help with consistency and the pain on the wallet. If you think you have a decent mana base, then by all means go ham with the best cards Magic has to offer. Let's start with the cheat effects. Tiamat will put the creatures into our hand, these will then put them onto the board. You want to see at least one of these in the game, which is why I'm recommending running between 6 and 8 of these. First up is cards that let us put creatures from our hand into play, multiple times over the course of a game. To make this deck get scary, we're looking for turns where we can put at least 2 dragons into play. So if we can cheat one into play with one of these, and then with our ramp hardcast the other, that will do really well. And because our commander lets us get the best dragons out of our deck, we should only need to do this once or twice in order to win the game. In a similar vein, but a bit more one-shot, is cards like Minion of the Mighty, Selvala Stampede, and Genesis Ultimatum. I know Minion of the Mighty could technically cheat something in multiple times, but the chances of it surviving a round of combat aren't great. These will still do a really good job at getting us a board of dragons, so should also be considered. Another way of cheating creatures into play is with things like Wild Pair, Lurking Predators, and Sunbird's Invocation. While these don't let us control the cards we're cheating into play, hitting any dragon off the top of the deck will still be really good. Some of the cards we've mentioned in this section can be a little pricey, but there's definitely a good selection of more budget cards out there as well, so run what works best for you. Moving over to our ramp, we have a lot of expensive cards in this deck, and we're also the full 5 colours, so we're looking to run between 10 and 12 bits in this deck. First up is Dragon's Hoard. I've run it since its release in my own Dragons deck, and it's fantastic. I'd highly recommend it. That bit of extra card draw is really good. After that, I'd recommend looking at Rampant Growth effects. These should be the base of the ramp package, with cards that get non-basic lands like 3 Visits, Farseek, and Skyshroud Claim going up a notch in this deck. As mentioned, we're looking between 10 and 12 bits of ramp in the deck, but at least 8 of them should be these effects. We want to be casting our spells and doing cool things, so we've got to be good and eat our veg and play these. On top of those effects, the rest of the ramp can either be made of spells that make our dragons cheaper to cast, or generate mana just for dragons. If I'm honest, I think the creatures are the weakest option, as they do die to board wipes, but if you're looking at a more budget-friendly build, they still do a really good job. Then moving on to the actual dragons that ramp, we have Ramos, Savage Ventmaw, and Klauth. These cards, like the cheat effects, will help us cast multiple dragons in a turn, which is really what we're looking for. Ramos and Klauth helping us cast our 5-card commander will be really helpful, and we'll be talking more about Savage Ventmaw when we get to our win conditions. Like with most commander decks, we're wanting to run at least 8 bits of card draw. Because of all the dragons, most of the card draw will care about power in some way. First up is spells that just straight draw us cards equal to a creature's power. They'll refill our hand in the mid to late game, and are just very solid at what they do. Next up is cards that either want us to have big things in play, or reward us when we cast our big hitters. The fact that these are on enchantments means that they'll be harder for our opponents to interact with, and while they only draw us 1 card at a time, they'll do it consistently over the course of the game. Last up is Niv-Mizzet Reborn. This will be dependent on how you build your deck, but if you're running a lot of the guild coloured dragons, it could be a really good include. Moving on to our interaction, this is a section where we can run some splashy dragons to answer some threats. We want to start with 8 bits of interaction, but you will need to play more if your playgroup is more competitive. Starting with our instant speed interaction, I would generally try to keep it to Gruul if you're working with more of a budget mana base, with Nature's Claim, Dragon's Fire, Beast Within, and Chaos Warp all being solid includes. If you have a really good mana base, then you can select from the best bits Magic has to offer, so go ham. A cool interaction that's probably worth mentioning is that Crib Swap does count as a dragon card, so you can tutor up with Tiamat if you really need to answer a creature. For some more thematic answers, Dragon Tempest, Sarkhan's Unsealing, and Scourge of Valakut are great at pinging any of our opponent's threats and keeping things in check. For some more final answers, Crux of Fate could be another auto-include, and Baleful Dragon, while pricey, does double up as a win condition, and is a scary thing for your opponents to face down. I'm also a big fan of Vivictus and Steel Hellkite. Vivictus is great at answering indestructible threats or anything else that's hard to remove, and Steel Hellkite is an absolute beating for any token player. Unfortunately, at some point our dragons will die, but we can take advantage of this in the form of some recursion. First up is Bladewing the Risen, and the spectacular Patriarch's Bidding. Bladewing gives us that double dragon turn all by itself, and a late game Patriarch's Bidding is basically a 1-card win condition. Even against other tribal decks, ours are bigger, they breathe fire and fly, so we'll come out ahead. In a similar vein, but much harder on the mana base, is Eerie Ultimatum. One of the benefits of a 5-colored deck is running cool cards like this, but obviously you need to make sure you have the mana base in order to cast it, so do think about it before including. And then one card I've found works pretty well in this kind of deck is Whip of Erebos. Being able to bring back one of our best dragons can be really impactful, and the lifelink it gives is really good in this deck, as we don't have a lot of early plays, so it can pull us back from a low life total. Moving on to some ways of winning the game, most of these will be dragons, or cards that do cool things with them. The biggest and baddest are Lathliss Dragon Queen and Otrava Hellkite. Both of these can get out of hand really quickly, and are a surefire way of getting a commanding board state. For me, these might be the first 2 dragons I tutor up if I have them in the deck. What goes well with having a board of flying threats is giving them double strike, with Ataka Worldrender or Terror of Mount Velas. Again, a pretty solid way of winning the game. And then there is Terror of the Peaks. Shoot your opponents in the life total whenever a Dargon comes into play. This can be pretty scary with all the cheat effects that we're running. Another solid include is Dragonlord Colligan. Giving our whole team haste has its benefits, as our opponents won't get a chance to react. For the combo player out there, we have Aggravated Assault and the previously mentioned Savage Ventmaw. As long as the Ventmaw can swing through, you generate enough mana for infinite combat steps. To help our dragons do that and swing through, you can consider Bower's Passage. It may be a bit cute, but as all our threats have flying, making it mean only our opponent's creatures with reach can block them, can be very strong. But if you thought that was cute, come with me to Magical Christmas Land with Descent of the Dragons and Karthus, Tyrant of My Heart. Jund. Turn everything on the board into a dragon, and then steal them. Live the dream with me. For a more realistic way of winning the game, Sarkhan the Mad's -4 ability can sling a serious amount of damage around. It basically means you go from killing 1 player to killing 2 players. Maybe it's a bit win more, but we're a dragon deck. If there was a time, it is now. Another way you can take the win cons is to look at Morophon the Boundless, which again you can tutor up with Tiamat in the same way as Crib Swap. This then makes all the 5-colour dragons either free or really cheap to cast. A 4-mana dragon is nothing to be sniffed at. I know I've only really scratched the surface on the dragons that are out there. These are the ones I like and have had good experience with, but every Magic set has new dragons that are great includes in this kind of deck. If you have the cheat spells, your ramp and your card draw set, you can really run whatever you want in this deck. Hitting an opponent in the face with a dragon has always been a solid way of winning a game of Magic, and long may it continue. Finishing up with some utility lands, the only colourless one I would consider would be Command Beacon, and even then that may be a bit too much for our mana base, but being able to recast our commander for cheap might be helpful. After those, I would jam as many lands that fix colours for our dragons as possible. We recently released a video on how to build a budget mana base, which if you're building this deck in particular, I think could be really helpful for you. Links will be down in the description below. Until next time, please like, share and subscribe, and let us know down in the comments if there are any commanders you'd like to see a deck tech on. Thank you very much for watching.